Well, we are back to the discussion, our old friend democracy. Now, when we concluded the last class, then we came with the idea that the core of democracy is choice. If there is no choice, there is no democracy, fundamentally speaking. Democracy must offer choices so that the individual can make its own choice and pick up whether it is ideology or some goods or some idea or whatever it is. So, ipso facto then you find that democracy is never one idea state. A democratic state must be multiple ideas, competitive marketplace, so to say. Now, I just, before I pass on to the next major aspect of our discussion, I must refer to another very important point made by John Stuart Mill and Alexis de Tocqueville, the French philosopher. Now, John Stuart Mill, we have already known, the mid-19th century most famous liberal thinker, and Alexis de Tocqueville, he visited America in the 1830s, and he, in his famous book Democracy in America, he compared his own country's democratic experiment, that is France, and the experiment that is going on in America, and he was very much impressed by American achievement, and he was trying to assert or urge the French people that we two nations, France and America, started more or less the same time, 1787 and 1789. But while America can establish its democracy in certain way, so his answer was that in the United States context, from the very beginning, the emphasis was on ethos of the individual and the individual enterprise. In France, we did not emphasize that point, and we are democratic, no doubt, but it is a democracy in which so much of radicalism came that French people couldn't decide which one to make the right choice, which choice would be the right one. But on one point, these two thinkers, Mill and Tocqueville, they were unanimous that democracy as a form of government must respect the rights of the minorities. Don't confuse with the word minority as used in current Indian context, not that. That means in whichever way the group of people within the society, they do not accept the philosophy of the ruling party. So they are the minorities. And you know that in a real democracy, there cannot be any permanent majority or permanent minority. So whoever will be in power, they must respect minority rights or minority's position. And one phrase that they coined is that the worst, the most important danger to a democratic form of government is the tyranny of the majority. This is the typical phrase. Tyranny of the majority must be resisted. Otherwise, democratic governance will have no meaning. In fact, once this debate is over and this point is 19th century thing is taken, a real representative democracy in terms of protective democracy, another concept used by Bentham, Jeremy Bentham, he was quite right from his own philosophical position of utilitarianism, that every institution will justify its utility, otherwise we are not going to accept it. So democracy must give protection to the interest of all, and therefore logically he demanded universal suffrage, not because of any other things, that it would be of utilitarian value if all people are given the right to vote. And during his lifetime, when just the process began of democratic reforms in England, but he couldn't see, that means he didn't live long to see subsequent reforms. And the British people by stages got the right to vote, and only as late as 1927-28 that the British women got the right to vote. So anyway, the atmosphere, political, social atmosphere are very important for the plant of democracy or sapling of democracy to be taking its roots. So these are some of the things that we must note before we pass on to this. Secondly, I have just passingly referred to Schumpeter in earlier class. Now I must refer to a few others who do not contest but do not accept also the conclusion of Schumpeter. For example, another German sociologist, Karl Mannheim, he said that okay, there are groups who compete for power, all right, but that is not the final thing. There is a social process in the society where there is some sort of an egalitarian stress, and that ensures the maintenance of democratic spirit. Then there is in 20th century T.B. Bottomore, a sociologist, and a French sociologist, Raymond Aron. So both of them disputed the stand of Schumpeter, arguing on the ground that the way society functions ensures that democracy is preserved. That is to say, every society in its configuration, in its building up institutions, power is diffused in such a way. May not be every time it is satisfactory, but power is diffused, and that ensures democracy. Does not mean that every time it is the elitist who determine. Not always. That is their point. So with this, I think we come to a general, I think, quite a satisfactory position what liberal democracy means. Now, the models of democracy. This is another, in 20th century, second half of the 20th century, many people have tried to give an idea of how many kinds of democracy could be there. I start with John Lively. In his book, Just Democracy, the book is called Just Democracy, in 1975, and he summarizes in 7 points the range of possible positions about democracy, the so-called rule by the people. That all should govern. That is, all should be involved in legislating and deciding on general policy. All people. In applying laws and governmental administration.
Sir, did he mean directly? All should govern directly, all should participate directly in a direct fashion or through representative?
No, he doesn't say that. He says involvement of people, one sense. There are altogether 7 senses. First one, this, what he says, that all should govern, all should execute, all should be involvement, everybody's. Second is, all should be personally involved. Now comes this. All should be personally involved in crucial decision making. Third, he says there can be another model, that rulers should be accountable to the ruled. This accountability relationship also makes one possible model of democratic governance. And fourth is, rulers should be accountable to the representatives of the people. That is Parliament. Representative of the people, and the ruler, that is the executive, accountable to them. This is one model. Then fifthly, he says, rulers should be chosen by the ruled. General ways. Let me give one example. In Britain, there is a system, and we have copied it, that any person can be appointed as a minister up to 6 months. Within 6 months, he has to be elected. So without being elected, first you can continue as minister. That is possible. That is one practice. Not theoretical, but the British practice is there, and we have also copied it in India. Yes. The point is, finally the time will come when every person who exercises power must be chosen by the people. Okay.
Has to get himself elected.
Legitimate.
For legitimacy.
Sixth is, rulers should be chosen by the representative of the ruled. That is, legislature will choose the ministers. But that is not the case in Britain or in India. It is the Prime Minister's prerogative to recommend names, and the head of state appoints them. But there could be a model like this. I can tell you that in modern Japan, post-war constitution of Japan, there is the provision that the house as a whole will choose the ministers. As a whole, not that ruling party
will choose the minister.
And last of all, the ruler should act in the interest of the ruled. Now, who will ensure it? And secondly, what is the interest of the people?
How to gauge the interest of the people?
Now, first defining what is in the interest of the people. I can give only one very simple example. We will say that the housing minister will always say that it is in the interest of the people, in the need of the people, we must go for more and more and more housing. Environment minister will say, well, that destroys the environment, so we must not do it. We must scatter, decentralize within limits, etc., etc. So, naturally, the opinion differs. Now, John Lively's, he tried to do it like this. But the famous one, British author David Held, the book is called Models of Democracy. It was published in 2006. He starts with that there are certain fundamental values or goods on which democracy is justified. Before modeling, he gives the fundamental principle. Why democracy? To this answer he said, because democracy ensures rightful authority or legitimate authority. Secondly, democracy ensures political equality. Third, it ensures liberty. Fourth, it ensures moral self-development of the people. Fifth, it ensures or safeguards common interest of the society or people. Sixth, it ensures a fair moral compromise on ethical and moral ground. And seventhly, building decisions that take everyone's interest into account. That is, while making laws or policies, everybody's interest has to be taken, so democracy is justified. Eighth, the social utility, the factor of social utility, democracy scores on that. And 9, the satisfaction of wants of the people is possible in democracy. And 10th, the decisions are efficient in democracy. Maybe there may be difference of opinion, no doubt, but this is how he starts his modeling scheme. David Held, depending on his argument is that depending on the class of positions taken, who takes a position from what angle, on that same thing that is democracy is being observed. If we look from this point, people's point of view, group's point of view, interest point of view, so there naturally models can vary. So he first identifies 4 classic models of democracy. 4 models. 1, the classical idea of Athenian democracy in ancient Greece. This is one model where power does not belong to the people, but people are brought together. They discuss this much. They discuss this much. Secondly, and it must be a police or small city-states. Second is the Republican conception of a self-governing community. Community itself will enjoy power and accountable government. Thirdly, liberal representative democracy, the typical Mills idea, etc. And fourth, Marxian concept of direct democracy, or Marxian model of direct democracy. So these are the, he says, 4 classic models. Then after analyzing this, then he comes to the discussion of 5 recent models.
Oh, okay.
This is the classic 4, then the 5 recent models according to Held. Number 1, competitive elitist democracy. Just refer to our earlier discussion. Some people have argued that governance is always by nature elitist. But he says, no, always. Even when it is elitist, appears to be elitist, there is competitive. If there is competition for power, then naturally it is not elitist in that sense. So, competitive elitist democracy, first one. Second one, I am talking of recent models. Second one, a pluralist democracy. That is, large number of groups enjoying power. Pluralist. Not, I hope you remember the discussion on sovereignty. Monistic, pluralistic.
Exactly,
that is where it is decentralized groups. They enjoy power, so it is pluralist democracy. Then legal democracy. Third is a legal democracy. That is, don't look for the reality. If the constitution or law is democratic, the system is democratic.
Okay.
For example, your face betrays you because as if you can't grasp this point.
Yes, sir, exactly.
Yes.
Sir.
So, meaning is here, suppose the constitution say all persons are equal. Equality before law is guaranteed. This is a legalist democracy.
Whether it exists or not.
Don't check it up with reality. Isn't it? So reality is another thing. So he says, okay, that is another model is legalist, just legal democracy.
For the sake of it.
Fourth is a participatory democracy, where people have some scope at least, some scope to participate.
But sir, isn't
Let
that...
me, case?
Sorry sir to interrupt you. Isn't that possible in pluralist democracy also?
No, pluralist is power is enjoyed by groups of people.
Oh.
But here people as a whole, they have some scope to participate in decision making. For example, let me give one, our current Indian example in Panchayati Raj. There is one institution called Gram Panchayat, elected, etc., etc. But very recent amendment of the constitution has provided for an institution called Gram Sabha. That is not election as such, but all adult people of the village will be called to a meeting where the decisions of the Gram Panchayat will be discussed. So, by this participation, they can influence decision making by their criticism, by this way or that way. So, that is another. Participation can take various forms. There is no one form of participation.
Thank you.
And fifthly, deliberative democracy. That is that democratic model which underlines or gives importance to deliberations, whether within the legislature, outside the legislature. That the people deliberate, and on the outcome of the deliberation, naturally the government of the day or parliament takes a note of it. So this scheme identifying specific models of democracy spans some time. Over time he has done how it has to be, can be defined and put in models. This classification is meant for another exercise for bringing out the essence of the meaning. By modeling, by classification, we get intimate knowledge of it, of a thing. And in fact, the contemporary perspective of democracy is reflected in the intense debates about nature of democracy within European and North American intellectual traditions. There, what we call a virile civil society, where they do not participate in decision making as such. But if the civil society as such is very keen, is very responsive, is very alert in scrutinizing all the decisions of the government. So on any decisions, the intellectual elite, they come and they feel that they have got something positive to contribute. And last of all, we come to the Marxist model, that is completely different model, democracy, and this is based, in fact, let me tell you that all the discussion till now that we have done, this is pertaining to, according to Marx Engels language, pertaining to liberal or bourgeois democracy, which they outset they rejected. So Marx said that liberal democracy or bourgeois democracy is only for the bourgeoisie, but it is not the people's democracy, because he said that the society's institutions are influenced and built on the basis of production relations, how production is done and distribution is effected. This relation determines the nature of the institution, and from it they say that people's democracy should be the ideal, in the sense that egalitarianism attracts, most attractive feature of it. In fact, though he personally did not approve of it, but he said that okay, that will do. Paris Commune, 1871, automatic spontaneous revolt of the people of Paris. Now Marx gave his approval to it. So that is another thing we can read his mind. And then what comes out really, the new concept of social democracy, that is democracy enjoyed by the people on the basis of egalitarianism. And from it, ultimately, Lenin defines it that there are two stages. One, first stage is socialism, when power is captured by the toiling masses, and that period will be dictatorship of the proletariat. That is, now that proletariat is larger in number, so if power belongs to many, that is a democracy. So it is a proletarian democracy. But when all the production contradictory relations are overcome by sheer abundance in production, there will be no scarcity, no demand, no conflict. So laws, bureaucracy, army, nothing will be needed, and the state will automatically, in course of time, wither away. That is the highest stage or communist society. And we, in the second half, in terms of models, in the second half of the 20th century, we can identify three models of so-called socialist democracy. One is the USSR model, another is China model, People's Republic of China, Mao Zedong, New Democracy, etc. And we can talk right now Latin American model also, Cuba and Venezuela, Bolivia, Castro, and Hugo Chavez. So they are talking and experimenting on different kinds of, they also said we are working for democracy, working for people, when we are far superior to bourgeois democracy. They have their own arguments. Now whether we think this discussion and modeling of democracy should conclude on this, that very important thing, that it all depends on from which angle you speak, which philosophy, first philosophy you take. This is my philosophy, so my varieties of models will be like this.
Anything can be shaped into a democracy nowadays, it seems.
No, not every time. At the very first class I told you that it can be done. So I think this is the, again, difficulties with democracy, but very interesting modeling have been attempts by the scholars of political science in recent, till recent time. All right.